Operator error. Now it's working. Thank you. Thank you. You'd think I'd done this before. Okay, so my name is Janine Latus. I'm going to pronounce your town Batavia just to get even for how badly you mispronounced my name. I'm very used to my name being mispronounced, but my name is Janine Latus, and I am the author of this book, If I Am Missing or Dead. If I Am Missing or Dead became a New York Times bestseller, a London Times bestseller, a Sunday Toronto Globe and Mail bestseller. It's translated into Sri Lankan, into Mandarin Chinese, Dutch, German, and I'm telling you this because, as you already know, this problem happens everywhere. We want to believe that it's them, somebody of a different race, a different religion, a different socioeconomic background, a different culture. But the truth is there are victims in this room. There are perpetrators in this room. There are former victims in this room. And if you are a former victim, I want you to let go of how embarrassed you are that you were in it. And I want you to own the courage and perseverance and strength it took for you to get out. So I'm also talking to you. Most of you in this room are familiar with the Duluth Power and Control Wheel. Am I correct? Okay, this is a visual depiction of the various forms of abuse, because too many people believe that abuse begins when she slaps him, or he punches her, or she punches her, or you get the combinations. You believe it begins when it's physical, but the truth is that it's this insidious growth of coercive control. A lot of people use the phrase red flags. I do not use the phrase red flags because red flags are obvious. You see red flags, but these things are so tiny, they are almost like the erosion that caused the Grand Canyon. They happen gradually. And the first time I saw the power and control wheel, I thought, well, that's normal. Well, that's normal. Oh, crap. And one of the most low-tech tools I recommend for people is to go old school and print the power and control wheel out on a piece of actual paper and hand somebody a yellow highlighter. And when they go through there and see how many of these things are occurring in their own relationship, they're far more likely to recognize the abuse for what it is. But because you've been exposed to this before, and because you're not going to comprehend it just looking it up on the screen, I'm coming.
I'm sorry. It's going to keep pinging for my email, and you don't want my email. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm going to tell you a story. And I think this story will help you understand the power and control wheel better. It'll help open up your empathy for victims, particularly victims who return to their perpetrator repeatedly, as most do. I want you to feel even more empathy, and I want you to understand the importance of what you're doing for people. We set? Okay. Except I lost control. First I had no power, now I have no control. Thank you. Here we go. This is me and my baby sister, Amy. I'm 10, she's 5. We're wearing grandpa's shirts because we're going to put on a dance show for our parents. Grandma just painted our fingernails. Obviously, my mother had cut my bangs. As small as I am now, I was much smaller then. And 2 years after this photo was taken, I was sexually assaulted for the first time. I was babysitting, and it was one of my favorite families. And that night I was a monster. I was the tickle monster, and I'm stomping around the house, and I'm chasing the kids, and I catch the kids, and I'm tickling the kids, and we're rolling around on the living room floor, and we're giggling, and we're laughing, and the dad comes home. He comes home, and he says, I wonder if the babysitter's ticklish. And then he pinned me down, and he started grinding into me, and his kids are behind the chair saying, Daddy, stop, please stop. And I can't figure out how to get him off of me because the gym teacher had said, kick him where it counts, but I'm pinned. And then I remember that when my dad gets mad at me, he takes the little hairs on the back of my neck and he yanks. And so I do that to the man, and he stomps out of there, and he is angry and he is mad, but he's left. So I'm safe. A couple of hours later, his wife comes home and she pays me. And she says, my husband will give you a ride home. And I say, oh, that's okay. I'll walk. And she says, are you kidding me? Your mother will kill me if I let you walk. And so I have to get into the car with this man. And I remember opening the door and that dome light pops on and I squeeze against the door as tight as I can. And he reaches over and he puts his hand on my thigh and he says, we'll never tell anyone what we did, will we? Well, the first thing I did was I told, right? I ran up the stairs, Mom, Dad. And Mom looked at Dad and I looked at Dad. And my dad said, never tell anyone or they'll know you're a slut. My dad said a lot of things. Your chest is so flat we could iron clothes on it. Your feet are so big. It's amazing you don't quack when you walk. You're exaggerating. I didn't say that. Where's your sense of humor? So I left home. I left home while I was still in high school and I had a little high school roommate and we lived in a garden view apartment, which is code for halfway underground and you're looking at the undercarriage of the cars in the parking lot. And we both worked 2 jobs and we would eat like Campbell's tomato soup with popcorn floating in it because that expands and it'll fill your stomach. But also because one of my jobs was at a cinema and we always had these big bags of stale popcorn lying around. And one night, my roommate and I decided to go dancing. We lived in Michigan. The drinking age at the time was 18. So we go to the Green Door Disco in Lansing. And we're dancing to ABBA's Dancing Queen, young and sweet, barely 17. You're a teaser, you turn them on. And we're drinking, and we're flirting, and we're dancing. And I say to my roommate, hey, I'm gonna head home. And she says, cool, I'll catch a ride. Which one of us is in danger? Anyway, I drive home in my luxury vehicle, a white Pinto with an orange roof. Some of you are old enough to understand just how luxurious that was. And I drove home and I pulled into my parking space and I scampered down the steps and I opened the storm door and I put the key in the lock of the wooden door. And all of a sudden this hand hits me on the back of the head. A man had followed me home from the bar and he smacked my face into the door and he dragged me inside and he raped me on the coffee table. And it was a cheap Formica coffee table with sharp edges. And my back looked like somebody had taken a cheese grater to it. And when my roommate got home, she found me curled up in a ball on the floor and she helped me into the tub and she put methylate on every single one of those wounds. And we swore that we would never tell. We'd been drinking. We'd been flirting. I couldn't identify the guy. We'd allowed ourselves to get separated. Everybody would know that I was a slut. Now, some of you in here know that convicted rapists, with what little research has been done on the very few rapists who have been convicted, they've raped an average of 8 times. So by not telling, what did I do? Who did I put in harm's way? By not telling, by my parents not telling, they did not save Sandy or Debbie or Beth, who were victimized by the same guy. The idea of silence doesn't save people. Now, on the upside, I'm actually quite resilient. I was either born resilient or I've had a lot of bad things happen to me. But at any rate, I finished high school. I went to college, I went to grad school. I was working as a pharmacy technician in grad school, and I had this cart of medications, you know. My family called that the years when I was pushing drugs. Some audiences hate that joke. Anyway, I'm working at the hospital. I'm going to graduate school and I meet a guy. And he's a med student. He's smart. He's good looking. He has a trust fund. What's not to like? And he made me better, right? Like when we came home from a party, he would say, you know your jokes aren't funny, right? So I learned not to tell jokes. You know you laugh like a hyena, right? So I learned not to laugh in public. Or when I would come down the stairs in my jeans and my hoodie, he'd look at me and he'd go, "You're going to go out with me dressed like that?" So he made me better, right? That fall, we went to his parents' house for Thanksgiving, and we're talking about a McMansion on a hill with a golf course for a lawn, and you drive up the drive, and there's chandeliers and there are candelabras. And as soon as we walk in the door, he and his father go into the study for some scotch. And I am handed an apron. And we go into the kitchen, and we take that golden brown turkey out of the oven, and we put it up on the tray, and we put the sprigs of parsley around it, and we carry it out to the table, and we get the green bean casserole, and she lets me scoop the potatoes out of the pan and put them into the bowl, and then you put that dent in the top and put the butter in there and make the volcano of happiness. Carry that out to the table, and when everything is perfect, she says to me, "You can go get the men." And so I do. I go and I get the men, and my boyfriend pulls out my chair, and I smooth that linen napkin over my lap, and his father starts to say the blessing over the bounty. And then he stops and he says, "Where the fuck are the yams?" And he picks up the turkey and he flings it at his wife. And it's clearly not the first time, because she ducks and it slides down the wall, and he storms off to his study and his scotch. And my boyfriend looks at me and he goes, "Help her." And he follows his father. And so I do. And we pick up that turkey and we smooth down that golden brown skin, and we put extra parsley on it to hide the scars, and we carry it out to the table, and we reheat the green beans and the mashed potatoes, and you can bet we remember the yams. And when everything is perfect, the mother says, "You can go get the men." And I do. And my boyfriend comes and he pulls out my chair, and I smooth that linen napkin on my lap, and everybody pretends that nothing happened. Now me, my eyes are like this big. I can't believe it. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Oh my God, my poor boyfriend, he's being raised by people who do this. Like, he is being raised by people who do this. And I am going to have to help him heal. I'm going to have to love him and take care of him and prop him up and make him healthy and happy and whole by loving him enough. Anybody here believe you can do that? So a couple months later, we went on a ski trip. Remember that trust fund? So he was covering our flights and our lift tickets and our hotel room, and we're skiing, and we stop and we have lunch and we have a beer, and we're skiing some more, and we stop and we have another beer. And that dehydrated crabby thing you get if you're drinking outside? Nobody, okay. Anyway, we went back to the hotel room to take a nap. And that's when I did it. I said the wrong thing. And that first fist hit me in the face. And the second one hit me in the gut. And when I went down, he started kicking me and kicking me and kicking me. And then he stopped kicking me and he fell down on the floor next to me and he was crying and he wrapped his arms around me and he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you made me do this." And for 3 days, I had to stay with him because he had our plane tickets. You want them? Because that's what abusers do, right? They control the money, so they control you. Now, one thing that I wasn't taking into account was that about 5 miles away was my Uncle Tony. And my Uncle Tony is an Uncle Tony. If I had called Uncle Tony, he and my 7 cousins would have come. But I was too ashamed to tell him that I'm a battered woman. I was too ashamed to tell him I chose somebody who would beat me. I was too ashamed to tell him that I had said the wrong thing. I did not want my family to know. So for 3 days, I had to stay with him. And then after 3 days, we go to the airport, and I'm walking into the airport and my head is down. I am not looking at anybody. And we get to the gate and we sit down and I'm not going to look. And then I hear Janine, Latus to the counter. And so I go over And the gate attendant moves from here to here. So now my back is to my boyfriend. And she puts her hand on mine and she says, "Are you okay, sweetheart?" And I said, "Oh, this?" I just skied into a tree. And she said, "No, no, honey, we've all been there. I can help you. I can put you on a later flight. I can say it's security. I can say we overbooked." And for the second time, I said, "No, I'm fine." When you fly with your sinuses full of blood, it is excruciating, absolutely excruciating. But I got home, and the first thing I did was I called Amy. Amy's 5 years younger than I am, insanely funny, never misses a birthday or Christmas, knows every piece of trivia about every movie ever made. We talk on the phone all the time about everything and absolutely nothing. And she says, "How was your trip?" And I said, "It was good, but I'm a lousy skier." And we talked about something else. And then I said, "Hey, he hit me." "What?" "He hit me pretty hard. I think my nose is broken and maybe some ribs." "Well, you broke up with him, didn't you?" "No. I mean, we were drinking. You know what his parents are like. You know what a pain in the neck I can be." My baby sister went quiet and she said, "Are you going to wait until he kills you?" And so I did break up with him. With Amy's help, I broke up with him, and she took my calls at 6 at night, at 10 at night, at 6 in the morning, those ugly, snotty, crying, terrible phone calls that nobody wants to take. She took those over and over and over again for me. And with Amy's help, I got out. But I also had help from somebody else. See, I couldn't go to the hospital. I couldn't go to the hospital because I worked at the hospital. And if I went to the hospital, people would know that I am a battered woman. And maybe they'd say, hitting is always wrong. But maybe they'd say, I wonder what she did to deserve it. But I also couldn't go to the hospital because my boyfriend worked at the hospital. He was a medical student. Is he supposed to lose his career because of me? So fortunately, I was on a softball team. And when you're on the hospital softball team, you know a lot of doctors and nurses. And so I called one of the doctors up, and he came to my house and he said, wow, your nose is definitely broken and at least 3 ribs. And there is no point in going in and getting them x-rayed because all we're going to do is have you hold still. And so he brought me a can of chicken noodle soup, and he brought me flowers, and he brought more soup and more flowers, and he visited and he took care of me, and we fell in love, and it was glorious, except that he was married. And he left his wife. He left his wife for me, and he should have, because we were in love. Oh my God, we were so in love. We were insanely in love. We were on the phone all the time. We were talking to each other all the time. We were wildly in love. And then I would do the wrong thing, and we'd be down here at the bottom. And it was like, oh my God, what do we have to do to get back up? And we would climb back up. And when you get back to the top, there's makeup sex, and there's dinners out, and there are flowers, and there are presents, and there are endorphins, there's serotonin, there's dopamine. And then you go back down here, and you're in cortisol land. Your body is flooded with cortisol because you're in fear. Now think about the addictive properties of this, and then this, and then this, and then this. When you ask people why do they go back or why do they choose another partner just like that, it's because to them, that's what love looks like. My husband put keystroke tracker on my computer because my husband loved me so much, so much, so much that he was terrified that he would lose me. He was terrified of losing me. And sometimes if I would talk to another man, maybe that meant I was going to leave him for another man. And your girlfriends, they're just a bunch of man haters. And family, we're family now. Now, y'all know your partner is supposed to help you blossom into the fullest version of yourself, right? What are your wants? What are your needs? What are your expectations? How can I help you? They are not supposed to make your life smaller. They are not supposed to make you live in fear. But that's what abusers do. They isolate you so that you are dependent upon them, so that you don't have other people giving you perspective, you don't have other people willing to help you when you're finally ready to get out. What's probably obvious by this point is that I have gorgeous legs. I have gorgeous legs, and they would look better in a shorter skirt, and maybe a shorter skirt, and maybe a tighter dress, and maybe stiletto heels, and maybe a push-up bra, and maybe you dress that way every time we go anywhere together, because who am I if I have you? But you know what? If you wear that clothing to the hardware store, the helpful hardware man is a very helpful hardware man. And then you're up all night with that finger jabbing you in the chest. Did you give him your phone number? You want to screw him, don't you? Did you guys go back behind the lumber yard? All night, all night. My husband and I were successful, and we had security cameras on the outside of the house. He had them put up so nobody could rob us, except that I would find him going through the tape at 3 o'clock in the morning to see if one of the Little League dads had stayed longer than necessary to pick up a uniform, to see if the FedEx guy had been there more than 20 seconds. All night. I remember one time we were at a restaurant, and I saw this guy from the gym across the restaurant, and I started sending him brainwaves. Don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, dear God, don't talk to me. And being a normal person, he came over and he talked to me. Came over, talked to me, trash talked me, what do you look at all you're eating, you're gonna be a lardo or whatever he said. It was nothing, it was completely innocuous. But as soon as he walked away, my husband started. So who's that? So who's that? So are you gonna eat all that? Ha ha ha. Oh, so he's looking at your body, he's commenting on your body. I woke up that night with a fist quivering over my face. And he said to me, "You're lucky I love you too much." Now, you're trying to figure out right now why I stayed with him. Because there were great times. We had kids, we had Little League games, we had field trips, we had holidays, we had vacations, we had all the happy things that you have as a family. It's as if you are walking down a long hallway, and 2 days a week, somebody steps out and punches you. You don't know which days it'll be, but you had 5 good days, right? Now imagine wondering every day, if I walk down this hall, which one's it gonna be? So anyway, we were up here. We were up here at this part, the exciting, the endorphins, the dopamine, the serotonin, happy land. And my husband was going to work. He was gonna go to work, and so he went down the hallway to our garage, and I went to the front door just to wave goodbye, and I see him pull out in his bright red sports car, and then all of a sudden he stops, and he backs up. He's fishtailing up the driveway the way he does when he's mad, and I know he's coming through that door. He's coming through that door, and I've done something wrong, and I don't know what it is, but I am definitely in trouble right now, and he comes storming at me, and he's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm getting smaller and smaller, and he gets to me, and he rips open the front door, and he says, "Who sent them?" And there on the stoop was an orange glass vase with a sleeve of yellow grocery store roses in it. And he picks it up and he starts pawing through it. Who sent them? Who sent them? Who sent them? And I'm thinking, oh my God, did I talk to somebody at the gym? Did I smile at somebody at Little League? Who sent these to me? What did I do wrong? And it takes him so long that he's going to be late for work. And so he says to me, "You call them and tell them it's your fault, and we will finish this when I get home." And I do. I call and I tell him, the hospital, that I had run out of gas and he had saved me. I lie, because why should his job be in jeopardy because of me? Now, at about this same time, Amy had met her cowboy. My sister Amy had been so obese and unhealthy that walking across this room would have been very difficult for her. And in the preceding year, she had lost 85 pounds, and she'd led me on a hike up Chimney Rock in North Carolina that I could barely keep up with. She had applied to and been accepted into the Graduate School of Religious Studies at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. She had asked her employer, the Kimberly-Clark Corporation, maker of Kleenex, if they would move her job from Atlanta, where she lived, to Knoxville so she could go to school, and they had said yes. Then she applied for and got a mortgage in her own name and bought this little duplex condo, and she met a cowboy. He's got the cowboy hat and the cowboy boots and the big rodeo belt buckle and a gold chain around his neck with a big gold cross, and he leaves her love notes. And Amy hasn't had very many love notes in her life. And at night, they like to, curl up and watch movies together. So Amy buys this enormous TV and these huge speakers. And this was before Bluetooth. So the speaker bar just kind of, you just walked over it when you walked into the house. And she said that they would set the alarm for 30 minutes early so that they could snuggle before she went to work in the morning. And I heard her say it. Before you go to work, doesn't he go to work? Well, he has priors, but nothing bad. He's never hurt anyone. There was the time that he test drove a pickup truck and forgot to bring it back. There were checks written on accounts that weren't his. There were at least 3 DWIs or DUIs, whatever they're called here. In all, he had been a guest of the state 3 times, but he'd never hurt anybody. And Amy was happy. But the thing is when you have that kind of record, it's extremely hard to find a job. And so Amy had bought him a dually, the pickup trucks with the double sets of wheels in the back, and a utility trailer and ladders and tarps and sprayers, everything he needed to set himself up in a house painting business. Amy was happy. Now, there was the time that my mom called and the guy answered. My mom asked for Amy, and the guy said, I chopped her up and buried her in the backyard. Just kidding, she's at the grocery store. And we got on the phone. Dangerous guy, bad sense of humor. Dangerous guy, bad sense of humor. Because we joke about violence in our culture all the time. All the time. And people do it to me, even though they know I'm going to come right back at them. But in the military, they're always saying, I'm going to throat punch you. What is that? Or you take the last jelly donut and somebody comes up to you and says, I'm going to get you, or I ought to smack you, or, right? We joke about violence all the time, and Amy was happy. At about this same time, I got invited back to speak at my alma mater. I am a graduate of the Missouri School of Journalism, which is one of the most famous schools of journalism in the United States, even though it's in the middle of a soybean field. So being invited back was a real honor. It was a real honor. And remember, I'm at home. I'm not talking to anybody else because it might offend my husband. And now I'm in front of an audience and I'm with these other people. And there's this guy I know and a woman and me and a guy I don't know. And we're telling stories about being freelance magazine writers. And we're only telling the fun stuff, like US Airways magazine used to fly me to, say, Seattle or New Orleans or Boston for a story called 3 Perfect Meals. And it was my job to stay there, all expenses paid, and eat until I could identify the best breakfast, the best lunch, and the best dinner. So we're telling them stories like that. We're not telling them the super boring stories, only the fun stuff. And when we're done, they storm the stage. There's college students, they come running down, they're all excited, and I am not touching ground. I am levitating. So I go home and I say to my husband, oh my God, I was funny. They want to be me when they grow up. And he said, you met a man. And I realized that I had met a man. I had met this man right over here, and he was age appropriate, good looking, and he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And I noticed that he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, and therefore I had cheated. followed immediately by, oh my God, you are crazy. You are crazy. You have let these messages seep into your brain to the point that you actually believe that noticing another attractive human being is cheating on your marriage. And for whatever reason, that was the thing. That was the thing that let me get out. And I called Amy. And Amy said, I've been telling you. And I said, I know, but I'm ready now. Now I'm ready. And with Amy's help, I got out. And she took those phone calls at 6 at night and 10 at night and 6 in the morning. She carried me through the early end of my marriage. And on May 4th, my husband moved out. I had a huge house. I had a 3-year-old child. I'm self-employed. I'm terrified, and I'm free. Amy and I talked almost every day through that process, all the time, sometimes about important stuff, but most of the time not. And I remember on the 4th of July, I called her up, and she was out in front of her little condo, and she was planting flowers, and she was baking bread in the bread maker I'd gotten her. Because see, my sister Amy had cancer. And when she had cancer, we came, right? I was there for a week, mom was there for a week, my brother was there for a week, until my sister was like, nobody come, please. All of you stay away from me. And so she's having this morning, smell of fresh baked bread in the house, fresh flowers outside. And I said to her, so hey, are you gonna go to the fireworks? And she said, we're gonna make our own fireworks. And we laughed, and I said, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And we got off the phone. 4 days later, my big sister called. You heard from Amy? No, why? What's up? Her boss called. Amy hasn't been to work in 4 days. That bastard killed her. My sister said, I know, but we can't think that yet. Because if we think it, it might be true. And it's not true because Amy's car is gone. Amy's car is gone. She's on her way to us, right? And we're on the phone. Is she with you? Is she with you? Has she gotten to mom? What about grandma? Did anybody call grandma? What about her old college roommate? Like, have we tried everywhere? And then it got too late. She should have been to one of us. And we realized that she'd been in a terrible car accident and she had amnesia. And all we had to do was find her and help her heal. And then they found her car. And then they found a note taped to the inside of her desk drawer at work. It was addressed to the Knox County Sheriff's Department, and it said, if I am missing or dead, pick up Ron Ball. It listed the debts. It described their fights. It included the line, I hope someday to find this and think it's funny, but if I don't let him get away with it. It was dated 10 weeks before we found it. For 10 weeks, she'd been afraid. And for 10 weeks, we talked about movies and music and my child and our nieces and nephews and politics and my divorce. For 10 weeks, she was scared, and she didn't tell mom, and she didn't tell her best friend, and she didn't tell her sisters. She didn't tell anybody. We all rushed down to Knoxville. Helicopters went up, search dogs went out, jet skis with detectives on them went up and down the river looking for anything at all. The cyclops eye of the TV cameras followed us absolutely everywhere. Every time we turned on the TV was my sister's face and the boyfriend's face, over and over and over again. But eventually I got a phone call from my husband. I know you think what you're doing is important, but you need to come take care of this kid. And I did. I needed to take care of my daughter. She's 3. And so I had to go home. And I'd pick up the phone to call for weeks. The one person I wanted to talk to wasn't answering her phone. It was a Monday when my mother called, and she said, they found Amy. And I knew that they hadn't found Amy with her sense of humor and her big laugh, never missed a birthday, never missed Christmas. What they had found was a body wrapped in a painter's tarp, tied with speaker wire, and buried at a construction site. It had been underground for so long that they had to send away for dental records. My family flew back to Knoxville, and I remember exactly where we were when our favorite detective pulled up in his big black Crown Vic, and he stepped out and he walked up and he said, "Mom, it's Amy." And then he held her while she cried. I didn't save Amy. So I wrote my book to save other Amys. I wrote it because of an inscription in the Holocaust Museum. Thou shalt not be a victim. Thou shalt not be a perpetrator. Above all, thou shalt not be a bystander. I wrote it because of a quote attributed to Harriet Tubman. I saved 1,000 slaves. I would have saved 1,000 more if they had known they were slaves. I wrote it because in the 1980s, people were dying and family members lied. They said cancer, they said natural causes. And then a guy named Randy Shilts wrote the book And the Band Played On. And pretty soon parents were marching in the streets demanding that our society do something about this thing that was killing their children. I wrote it because the idea that what happens in the home stays in the home, that got my sister killed. The idea that a victim should be shamed to silence, that got my sister killed. If I had told my truth, my sister could have told her truth. If I didn't pretend everything was perfect, my sister wouldn't have had to pretend everything was perfect. I wrote this book to save other Amys. So I'm going to tear apart the power and control wheel just for a minute, even though most of you are familiar with it. This one's easy. Not while they're drunk, not while they're asleep, but coercion? Honey, come on, just once. Please, I know you don't want to, but if you do, I mean, honestly, if you don't, I'm sure I can find somebody who will. If the person who has the bulk of the income does not give the other person enough money to pay the bills, that is a power and control move. This person is dependent on this person. If this person runs up so much debt that this person has to do things that person doesn't want to do, that is a power and control move. If you hide the car keys and your partner can't go to work and therefore loses their job and therefore is dependent upon you, that is a power and control move. If you don't come home to take care of the kids when you're supposed to and your partner loses their job because of it, power and control move. If you take their work clothes and you toss them in the yard and you hit them with a little bit of that old Kingston lighter fluid and drop a match, that is a power and control move. Anything that tries to control your partner through the use of money is financial abuse. We had a really good presentation on this from the officers earlier today, just this idea of, you know, I know you lose your phone all the time, sweetie. Can I find my phone on your phone? I'm now GPS tracking you. If I take your phone and I text all your friends, you know, I hate you, and your friends get angry, now you don't have friends. Now you're what? Isolated again, right? If your partner goes through your phone, goes through your phone, why are you talking to that person? Why are you talking to that person? What do you mean you did that? What is this? Ha, ha, ha. What do you mean LOL? That is a manipulative power and control move. We have people who will have a smart home and they'll ring the doorbell and the person at home runs down and there's nobody there, and they do it over and over and over again. And then when the abuser gets home, this person says, this happened. And the abuser's like, oh, you're so stupid with technology. It's one more way to keep your partner off balance and make your partner feel stupid and unworthy. You're stupid. You're fat. You're ugly. Nobody else is ever going to love you. I mean, the fact that I loved you, it was a favor, because nobody's ever going to love you. If you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. If you leave me, you'll never see the kids again. You'll never get a dime. Right? It's either me or alone for the rest of your life. None of those things leaves a bruise. Every single one of them leaves a scar. And healing from being told you're stupid, fat, ugly, incompetent, and unlovable is far harder and takes way longer than recovering from a bruise. And then this one's easy. We all know nobody's supposed to kick, punch, stab, slap, shove, strangle, shoot us. I mean, in this room, y'all know which one of those is most likely to lead to an actual murder. You do? It's strangulation. My sister was strangled. So I'm going to open to Q&A, but I do want to point out right now that my email address is on this screen. If you have a question you don't want to ask in front of your peers, I always answer my emails. If a question comes up a week from now, email me. If you don't take a picture of this or write it down and still want to talk to me at some point, Google me. If you can't find me on Google, you need to really work on your Google skills. Okay, what questions do you have? Yes, ma'am. You know, sometimes I don't even ask for the first question. I just say, and I know what the first question will be. If you are ever in Knox County, Tennessee, free advice, do not spit on a Knox County Sheriff's deputy and try to escape by bicycle. Not gonna fly. They do not have a sense of humor, as it turns out. He did get away twice. They finally, the Kimberly-Clark Corporation put up a reward for information leading to his capture. He was on his way from Tuscaloosa at that time to Montana to hide out at his brother's place. His brother had already called for the reward. U.S. Marshals boarded a bus in Arkansas with their guns drawn. They dragged him off. They put him in an unair-conditioned Arkansas jail and let him bake for a couple of days. Finally got him up to Knoxville. He pled guilty to second-degree murder. He got 18 years plus 2 for abuse of corpse, so that's 20 years. At about 3/4 of the way through his sentence, he was up for parole, and I got an email. It turns out that while he was in prison, he had acquired a contraband phone, and he had gone on Facebook, and he had found someone he knew from middle school, and he sent her an email or a message that said, "I remember you, you had nice tits." And she swooned, as one does, and began a prison romance. This prison romance was ongoing. And so he's up for parole, and I get an email from her sister. And her sister writes and says to me, "Would your family go testify to help save my sister?" Magic words. We all drove to the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. My mother was on a walker at the time. She had to lift it over the gate thingy, and there's concertina wire overhead, and she's squeaking down these cinder block walls. And we had to face down the man who murdered my sister, who made a choice at that time to show us how he murdered my sister. We did succeed in keeping him in prison, but he did complete his sentence. And when he got out, the girlfriend started messaging me saying, "We know where you live. We will find you." My local officers came to my home. They inspected and said, you know, add this here and add that there and be aware of this. And I did not leave the house for almost a year without my dog, who is a golden retriever. So he is out. He lives in a single wide on a farm in Mississippi. What questions do you have? You know you're with the law enforcement folks when all they care about is, did they get the guy? Yes, ma'am. She kept it very quiet. We all pooled the little details we had gotten afterward, and if we had all known as the whole story, Right, but you hold the confidences of your sibling. My sister told me this in confidence. I'm not going to go to the whole family and say, gossip, gossip. And, in retrospect, we wish we had spoken to each other. In retrospect, we were also extraordinarily angry at Amy because she could have told us the truth. She knew that if she called, we would have come, and she chose not to. She said at one point to me that I've always considered myself the family screw up, and I don't want to admit that I picked the wrong guy. That's that shame thing that, we don't want to be judged. So there weren't any overt, like, darn it, I knew that and I didn't go do anything. We would have come down in an obnoxious level had we known. My mother's actually going through dementia right now, and there's a family chat that goes on 24 hours a day of everybody who's talked to mom, because nobody wants anybody else in the family. Like, we don't want to miss anything. And it's because of what happened with Amy. So I do want to talk just for a second. I speak around the world for the United States military, to the United States military.
I have a question.
Yep.
Going back to when you were a child and you were babysitting and you made the comment that you could have saved there were 3 other people. Did that guy ever get caught, or was any consequences against the man that?
So he was also a substitute teacher at the school. And this was just down the road from Michigan State University, where Nadler, the gymnastics doctor, was sexually assaulting people. And the Michigan State University had to pay something like $500 million to the victims because people up the chain of command had known all along and not done anything. So about 4 years ago, it was shortly after the Nadler thing broke, the police department in my hometown got an anonymous letter saying that this man had been sexually assaulting girls in this school, and the principals and the other teachers had always known. And the letter was anonymous, but it listed 2 victims. I was one of them. The detectives called me, got my story from me. And then they went to call the other person. In the 24 hours between when I talked to him and I talked to him the second time, I sent a message to a former classmate who's a librarian in our hometown. And I said, hey, did you ever have a problem with Mr. And she goes, I didn't, but so-and-so did. In 24 hours, we found 12 victims. We were able to, the detectives were able to bring him in, but I'm sorry? So the detectives, because he had not penetrated anyone, the statute of limitations had run out. He had terrorized, he had groped, he had done all kinds of things, but he had never penetrated any of us. And therefore he got out. Interestingly, I was talking to my friend and I said, did we have any other creepers in town? And she said, well, your dad. Yeah, that was, ooh. Yes.
How people tend to pick the same way. And my real question to you is, how would you recommend somebody break that cycle?
Thank you. I love that question. So yes, if this is what love looks like to you, then loving, respectful love, is that really love? Like, I was dating this guy after I'd broken my own particular cycle, and I was talking, so you're my guy, right? You're my guy. Hi. And then I'm looking at you. Are you going to get jealous? Are you going to get jealous? Because if you love me, you're going to get jealous. I poked and poked and poked, trying to find what looked like love to me. And it took me a long time to learn what healthy love looks like. So I absolutely recommend what I call a dating sabbatical. Taking time off. Don't go to the next person who's going to save you from this. Stay by yourself. Go to dinner by yourself, make friends, go to movies, discover that you're great all by yourself, that you're comfortable and happy, you have a great sense of humor, you're the best company you've ever had. And then the person you're going to be attracted to and the person you're going to attract is probably going to be healthy, happy, and whole too. If you're insecure, you are going to attract an insecure person who is going to exploit you. If you are solid in yourself, then the person you're going to choose is far more likely to be healthy. And so it's very hard for young people to take a dating sabbatical, They self-identify as being in a couple and that's what gives them value. I'm trying to denormalize that. What other questions? I want you to remember, because some of you are parents, right? The idea of staying together for the kids. Our kids copy us, right? How many people in here's kids are Packers fans? I can't believe you said that out loud. In this town, I just assumed that everybody would be Bills fans here, right? I have a daughter who puts ketchup on her mac and cheese, which should be illegal. But she does it because I do it. Our kids are copying us. And so if somebody treated your little pumpkin the way one of you is treating the other one, if it was, one person is dominant or one person is submissive or one person is belittling or humiliating, and if you saw somebody do that to your child, you're like, you're going to have to go through me to do it, then stop showing them that that's what love looks like, because they are looking at us to see what love looks like. They're looking to see what a respectful, loving relationship looks like. So, the next time you choose to, be dominant over your partner, remember what it's doing to your children. Yes.
You mentioned that kids already kids.
My kids are doing remarkably well, I have to say. Is this even wood? My kids are doing well. They don't have a relationship with their father, but they are doing well. And that's their choice. I did not cut them off.
One day that you suddenly woke up and said, no, I don't want this. I don't want this life. I know there's every single moment. Or was it things that just kind of came together?
So I think the question was, did I have a single aha moment when I realized I didn't want this anymore? And part of it is you notice it over and over and over again. And by the way, if you want, I'll finish in a second, but if you want to help somebody get out, bearing witness is really important. Because if I am at a party and my partner humiliates me, makes a joke at my expense, and I'm not happy about it, I'm sad. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I saw that, that must have hurt. Now, all of a sudden I realize I'm not overreacting. I didn't imagine it. It actually happened. If you see somebody, who's changed, like you guys were talking about earlier, changed their behavior, used to be like this, now they're like this, used to play a sport or go to happy hour or, play cards with friends and they're not doing it anymore, pay attention. Changes are often indicative of something. Extra makeup. I had a high school I was talking to, we had 500 utterly dead silent high school students. I mean, imagine hearing this and you're 17. And of course, the kid in the front row, his phone goes off. But it doesn't just go off, it goes off with something like, I like big butts and I cannot lie. And he's dying and he's diving on it, to get it off. And, the students are laughing, it's all fine. The next day I get an email from him and he said, you probably remember me, I'm the one whose phone went off. And he said, but you probably didn't notice that I was wearing long sleeves. When my girlfriend gets mad at me, she digs her nails in and drags them down my arm. And so sometimes I wear long sleeves, sometimes I wear a high collar, sometimes I wear a hoodie. You're watching for changes like that. The aha moment for me was simply that once I spoke to my alma mater and I was excited and happy about it, and his reaction was to utterly deflate it, and then for me to believe that I deserved that utter deflation, that was the moment where I went, if you saw a friend go through this, you'd be all over him, telling him that is not appropriate behavior. But for some reason, you just keep putting up with it. And part of it is, does a fish see water? So if you are in it constantly, 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 you don't even see it as unhealthy. I can't see the inside of your marriage. I don't know that you don't fight and say horrible things to each other all the time behind closed doors and have a lovely facade on the outside. I had a lovely facade on the outside and nobody knew what was going on behind me. And, until people bear witness and help you understand, like I asked my friend, how often do you and your husband fight? And she said, we don't fight. Why would we fight? She goes, how often do you fight? And I go, most days. Most days. And you don't even realize that that's not normal behavior. So back to what I was saying, I speak to the American military, I speak to universities, and I raise money for shelters. I do a bunch of fundraisers for shelters. I just did one that I called the Battered Women's Shelter fundraiser in the Keys in Florida, because their shelter got hit by a hurricane. So as if running a shelter isn't hard enough, let it get wiped out by a hurricane and start over again. But I just want you to understand that we absolutely need to talk. Social media makes it worse because everybody else's life is perfect. And then your own life is not perfect. And so you hide even more. And that is not what we need. We need more honesty. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, a perpetrator who's actually been held accountable at some level, maybe they've been convicted, swears they're never going to do it again. And now who is exposing the children to it? And the father is the perpetrator? Okay, but it's not the mother who's the perpetrator, right? Okay, so the mother keeps exposing the child to this person who's never going to do it again? How many people believe anybody's never going to do it again? I mean, it takes so much work, so much therapy, so much, reassessing your life to stop doing something like that. That child's not in a safe spot. Now, how do you tell the parent? Do we have any experts in here who know how to talk to the parent? I don't have a great answer for you.
Sorry. But when kids are involved, it's really tricky because we're in child welfare, like this row. So because there is an obligation to protect your child, but I guess I feel like there's two schools of thought on it, on whether or not to hold, because obviously they're a victim in their romantic relationship but they're also have a responsibility to their children to keep them safe. So it's kind of like this convoluted situation. And I know we've done trainings where there's different schools of thought on not re-victimizing the victim by holding them responsible for keeping their children safe. But at the same time, we have to. So it's kind of what would you, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously they are a victim, but they're also have an obligation to their children to keep them safe as a parent.
So you're probably more of an expert than I on this, but since I do listen to a whole lot of experts all around the country all the time, nobody else is going to protect that child. Even with your best intentions, you're on the outside. If the mother's not going to protect the child, who's going to protect the child? And so, yes, you have to find a way to get the mother to protect the child, which is super sad. I'm aware of my time. I'm going to leave you with a little parable. So, and some of you have already heard it in some other context in your life, but I have this cartoon in my house, and it's by a guy named Andy Singer, and it's Happy and Crabby. And Happy and Crabby are walking down the beach, and there's been a big storm, so there are all these gorgeous, seashells all over the beach. And Happy sees a starfish, and she bends down, she picks it up, and she tosses it into the ocean. And then she walks a little further, and she sees a second one, and she picks it up, and she tosses it into the ocean. And she's walking a little farther, and she sees a third one, and she picks it up. And Crabby says, "What are you doing that for? You're never going to save all of them." And she tosses it into the ocean, and she says, "I saved that one." Go save somebody. Thank you.